All rise. Oyez, oyez, oyez. Silence is commanded upon pain of imprisonment while the honorable judges of the 7th District are seated. Ain't you let me in. All those having motions to make, please enter suits to prosecute, or any other business before this court, come forward and you shall be heard. God save the Commonwealth and this honorable court. There'll be no talking while the judges are seated. You may be seated.
Oh, don't worry about it. All right, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
And Madam Clerk, have you had an opportunity to swear in the court reporter?
I have not.
All right, could you please swear in the court reporter?
If you would please raise your hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm to transcribe these proceedings to the best of your ability, so help you God? Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
We would all like to welcome you to this wonderful occasion where we get an opportunity to celebrate one of our retired judges who has served here with distinction and dignity for many years. I won't say how many, but at least since I was here and before. And we are so thankful to welcome the judge and his family, but also our visiting jurist and distinguished guests. So I'd like to recognize them at this time. You'll note to my left is Judge Gary Mills here from the Newport News Circuit Court, and Judge Sugg from the Newport News Circuit Court. Also from our circuit court is Judge Christopher Papille and Judge Hoffman, if you all will raise your hands. Joining us from other jurisdictions is Judge Holly Smith. Judge Vincent Conway is our retired judge. Judge Curran as a retired judge here. Judge Pugh, also retired from Newport News. Judge Hutton, retired from Hampton. And Judge Kushner, retired from Chesapeake. Joining us from the General District Court is Judge Ryan Lewis, and also retired Judge Al Masters. Joining us from the JDR Court is Judge Jeffrey Roundtree, and also retired Judge Carpenter, and Judge Brian Smalls from Williamsburg as well. In our audience, we have distinguished guests. Joining us is Councilwoman Artisha Woodbury, Madam Clerk Mabel Washington Jenkins, our city clerk, and you all just saw Madam Clerk Reason swearing in. We also have Rita Payne, retired clerk from General District Court, and we have, is it Denise Hayne? Denise Hayne, also from our Civil Division, Newport News, General District Court, retired. Libby Green is present, who was the judicial assistant for Judge Fisher, and is Phyllis Williams also present? Also present is Ms. Phyllis Williams, former clerk from the Newport News General District Court. Joining us further back in the audience is Commonwealth's Attorney Howard Gwynn, who is with us, and our police chief from Newport News is also present, Chief Drew. And if I missed anyone, they say in church, charge it to my head and not my heart. But if there is anyone else, please let me know. And I welcome the family of retired Judge Timothy Fisher as well, his wife Nancy. Could you wave your hand? And we also have his daughter and grandbabies. Wave your hands. That counts for you all too. All right. At this time, I would like to recognize our president of the Newport News Bar Association, Patrick Murphrey, and ask that he would make a motion.
Thank you, Your Honor. I would move that the court declare this a ceremonial proceeding and move the court to receive the Newport News Bar Association and the guest assembly.
And the court grants the motion and welcomes the Bar Association and the guests. And you could formally introduce.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, may I approach the podium to introduce Judge Fisher's family?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. It is my privilege to introduce Judge Fisher's wife, Nancy Fisher. Let's greet her. Nancy's daughter, Elena Durham. Grandchildren, Yenna and Archie. And now, Your Honor, I request permission for Mrs. Fisher to unveil the portrait of Judge Fisher.
Yes, Ms. Fisher, you definitely may approach. Can we help her? You can pull it all the way down, Nancy. I'll note for the record that Judge Fisher smiled.
Your Honor, may I make a presentation?
You are recognized to make a presentation, Mr. Murphrey.
Thank you, Your Honor. Judge Fisher, thank you for your many years of dedicated service to Newport News. And in appreciation of that service, I present this portrait as a gift to the court and the City of Newport News from the Newport News Bar Association. Thank you, Your Honor.
On behalf of the Newport News Circuit Court, the court accepts the portrait. And at this time, I would recognize Councilwoman Patricia Woodbury, who will accept the portrait on behalf of the City of Newport News.
Nowadays, it is sometimes hard to know the difference between a man and a woman. And the man's name that is in the program is not me. I am a woman, and I know the definition. I am so honored to be able to accept this on behalf of the city, on behalf of all the people in the city that you have impacted over the years. Some of them didn't think it was a good thing, I'm sure, but I know that in the end, it was a very good thing. And I remember also your work with drug court and how important that program is to our city. And so I thank you for all of those, and I thank you for all your service to all of our citizens and for all of the people who you have impacted. So thank you again. And I accept this on behalf of the City of Newport News. We are grateful to accept it.
The court again recognizes Mr. Patrick Murphrey.
Thank you, Your Honor. At this time, I am pleased to introduce Artisha T. Gregg, past president of the Peninsula Bar Association, who will bring greetings from the Peninsula Bar Association.
Thank you, Ms. Gregg. Come forward.
To all of the judges that are here today, and to all of the elected officials, and to our honoree, the Judge Fisher, good afternoon. It must have been fate for me to be here to speak because I didn't know anything about it. And what happened was the president of the Peninsula Bar Association said she couldn't make it. And so she asked me, would I come and speak? And I said, oh, who's it for? And she said, Judge Fisher. I said, of course I would. I've only practiced in front of him hundreds of times, so yes, I would come and speak. I will just make a few comments. Judge Fisher has become one of my favorite judges to practice in front of. When I first started out, he was more intimidating to be in front of because he's very no nonsense. You know, you couldn't read him, and he was, you know, very much about do your thing, what are you doing, get it together. But what you learn as you do this for a while, Judge Fisher is the type of judge that you love to put your difficult clients in front of. Because when you have a client that is obnoxious and thinks they know everything and they don't want to listen to you and they tell you what they're going to do and what's going to happen and what the judge needs to do, there's nothing better than looking at your calendar and seeing that that hearing is going to be in front of Judge Fisher. Because you know that, and you say, oh, yes, please say all of that in front of Judge Fisher. Because you already know that he is going to shut that foolishness down. And what I have learned as I've gone along is that when you have a difficult client and you put them in front of Judge Fisher, after that hearing, they are way more reasonable. You know, it's more like, oh, you know what, Ms. Gregg, maybe we should plea. And I'm like, yeah, I think so. So I appreciated that. I want to just tell one quick little story. When I first started out, and it's been almost 20 years, but when I first started out, I was a baby prosecutor working for Howard, and I was in front of Judge Fisher. I had a child sex case, and I was real nervous, and it finished. And I remember after it was done, Howard came to my office, and he said, I just got a call from Judge Fisher about you. So, of course, you know, my heart sinks. I was like, oh, my goodness, what in the world? I didn't know because, you know, Judge Fisher, it was, he's not, you know, the that a boy type, you know, judge. So I didn't know what it was. And Howard said, Judge Fisher told me that your direct examination on the child victim was one of the best he ever saw. And that meant everything to me because I knew that if Judge Fisher said that, he meant it. You know, it wasn't like he was just saying that to, you know, make me feel good. That was something that he meant. And so that gave me such confidence in the beginning of my practice. And so thank you so much for that, Judge Fisher. So on behalf of the Peninsula Bar Association, and we just want to say congratulations on your retirement, and thank you so much for your service.
And the court again recognizes Mr. Murphrey.
Thank you, Your Honor. At this time, I'd like to introduce Shannon M. Jones, past president of the Greater Peninsula Women's Bar Association, who will bring greetings from the Greater Peninsula Women's Bar Association.
Please come forward, Ms. Jones.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
To our members of the bench and all of our distinguished guests, I am so pleased to be here on behalf of the Greater Peninsula Women's Bar Association. Our president just gave birth about a week or so ago, so she is not here. So I'm so happy to be here in her stead because I am so excited to be able to recognize Judge Fisher. As many of us have experienced, Judge Fisher is an important part of our continuing legal education. When I started off here in Newport News, I actually came to Virginia after practicing in Pennsylvania. I did not go to a Virginia law school. I went to law school at Howard, and that is a national law school, so I did not learn Virginia law before I came here. And I was very overwhelmed with how different Virginia does things than other jurisdictions, than other states. The first docket that I had here in Newport News by myself was in front of Judge Fisher. And it was a Friday junk docket. And for those who don't know, these junk dockets are an absolute mess. So the docket had sentencings, pleas, all kinds of things. I had no idea what it was, and the docket was like this tall. And so I went to my supervisor, and I was in a panic. I was like, I have no idea what this stuff is. I don't know how I'm gonna do this by myself. And the first question that he asked me was, which courtroom are you in? And I said, Circuit Court 2. So he said, not only are you going to be fine, you are going to be back in 1 hour. So I'm like, what do you mean? Like, how could I possibly get this done in an hour? He said, trust me, just go with whatever he says. Just trust me, you'll be fine. So I'm like, okay. So I walk into this courtroom, and it's honestly chaos because it's one prosecutor, it's a ton of defense attorneys. They all want to go first. They all want to get out of the courtroom. And I won't name any names, but when the judge came out, one member of our bar went straight to counsel's table and called his own case. So I stood here like, is this how we do it in Virginia? This defense attorney's calling case. So he stands up and says, Judge, my client's not here today. He's not going to be here. You know, he failed to appear in York County. I don't have any contact with him. So, you know, I just want to go ahead and call the case. Judge Fisher is logging into his computer. He had not even made eye contact with me. Commonwealth, are you asking for a capias? So I stood up, and I kind of thought for a moment, and I looked over, and I was like, what's a capias? And so, but I remembered what my supervisor said, just trust him, just go with it. And based off of context clues, I concluded that the right answer was, yes, Your Honor, ask for a capias. And so he's like, so ordered, capias is issued. So I wrote a little note to myself, find out what a capias is. And fun fact, that is just an arrest warrant. Virginia wants to be a little different. We want to use Latin terms instead of plain English. But I made it through that docket, and it certainly was finished in 1 hour. Quite frankly, I probably did not need to be there at all. But what I learned was Judge Fisher is absolutely a teaching judge. I quickly learned that that was the best courtroom to be in for my difficult witnesses, for my challenging cases. And although it would be very intimidating to be there, he made me a better lawyer. I knew the level of preparation that I needed to have to be in that courtroom. And even when I annoyed Judge Fisher, even when he was displeased with me, I never regretted going before him because I knew that it made me better. The last jury trial that I did with Judge Fisher was without question the most difficult jury trial that I have ever done. And I'm so thankful that it was in front of him. I remember sitting in the courtroom trying to balance how to approach this case. And actually, Ms. Gregg was standby counsel on that matter with me. But I remember I stood up to object, and Judge Fisher was, again, facing his computer. He was not facing me. And I don't even think I got the whole word objection out of my mouth. And without turning his head, he was like, overruled, Commonwealth. And he gave me this look like, sit down. But I knew I had to trust him, because if there's one thing that we all know about Judge Fisher is that he protects the record, and that's exactly what he was doing. This was a pro se litigant, and he was also protecting that litigant's rights to a fair trial. And when you go in front of him, and as a prosecutor, when you get a conviction, you can be confident that that conviction is going to be upheld. And that was absolutely my experience. And so I consider it an absolute privilege to have practiced here in front of Judge Fisher. I am so thankful that he did not do what he said he was going to do and leave us and go back to Charleston. Thank you for staying here with us. Not yet, he hasn't. And on behalf of the Greater Peninsula Women's Bar Association, I want to wish you a happy and restful retirement, because you have absolutely earned it. And we're just happy that you're still here in Newport News, and we look forward to seeing you in our community.
And I recognize Mr. Murphrey again.
Thank you, Your Honor. I would like to introduce Joshua Goff, who will provide remarks.
I was thinking about what I was going to say about Judge Fisher, and my first thought was it's entirely appropriate to just do stream of consciousness and not really have anything in particular to say, so that's what I'm going to do. But my second thought was I should see if Libby or Teresa saved any copies of his jail mail, because if there's one thing about Judge Fisher, and those of us who practice criminal law in front of him know, is he is the only judge in the Commonwealth of Virginia that enjoyed reading his mail every day. And those of us who practice criminal law and the judges know that you only write the judge for 3 reasons: to complain about the judge, to complain about your lawyer, or to talk about the fringes on the flag and how that means this is an admiralty court and how their case has to be dismissed. It's always one of those 3. So most judges, I think, don't enjoy going through that process, but Judge Fisher always did. And to the extent that when you went in his office, he hung some of the greatest hits on his office wall, one of which I think was written in blood, but couldn't get my hands on that one. So I don't have jail mail to read, but I have lots of memories of appearing in front of Judge Fisher, not nearly as long as Artisha did, but one of my first cases appearing in front of Judge Fisher also involved Artisha. Judge Fisher called me out of the blue one day, and this wasn't the case, it involved Artisha, and called me in my office himself, not Libby or Teresa, but him, and said, this is Tim Fisher. I'd like for you to handle an appeal for me. And I'm like, oh, wow, sure. Never done one before. Came to find out it was a murder with like 4 mistrials and about 18 days worth of transcripts that I'm sure none of the other 15 attorneys that he asked to do it before me would do. So I did it, and I think Judge Fisher still to this day has cost me the most amount of sleep ever from having to figure out how to do that appeal, from starting out with having to note the appeal, which I didn't know how to do at the time, to seeing it all the way through. But shortly after I said yes to that, I looked in my box downstairs in the courthouse, and I see an appointment order with some case numbers on it. I'm like, oh, this is good, about 6 or 8 case numbers. I look, it's a double first-degree murder and some other charges. At this point, I had never done a jury trial before. Didn't tell my client that. But set this double homicide with Artisha, who, is considerably older than me. So had many more years of experience than I did at that time. I went up against her, and I don't think Judge Fisher ever knew that he appointed me to my first jury trial, but I try not to tell people that the first time I ever appeared in front of a jury was with someone facing, I think, 2 life terms plus 27 years in prison. But as Shannon said, you learned something every time you went in Judge Fisher's courtroom. And the comment was made earlier that Judge Fisher had a little bit of smile in his portrait, and I was glad to see that, because we all know he had such a wonderful sense of humor. But Judge Fisher also had a softer side, and I think those of us who appeared in front of him in a criminal context know that he had a softer side for veterans and for those suffering from substance abuse. And we don't know exactly how many people he helped through his work with the drug court, through stern lectures in the courtroom, or just through understanding what people going through those challenges went through. But I personally know of a few people who are on the straight and narrow now because of Judge Fisher's tough love with people, particularly involving substance abuse. And so those of us who have appeared in front of Judge Fisher for, in my case, the past 13 years, and probably some people for longer, will know that he has been talking about his 3 pensions for all of those years. That he's got it made. And he'd usually say it in the context, looking at me, that you don't have it made. I don't even know if you're going to get 1 pension, much less 3. But he'd say he gets his military pension, his judge pension, and his Social Security. And he was looking forward to that. Those of us who know Judge Fisher know that he served in the military, served as a military lawyer at a time where it was not easy to do that, during the Vietnam era, where people did not appreciate people's service the way they do today. And so, Judge Fisher, you have richly earned each of those pensions. I hope you milk them for all their worth for many years to come.
The court would like to thank Mr. Goff, Ms. Gregg, and Ms. Jones for their comments. The court now recognizes Mr. Murphrey again so that he can recognize Mr. Cowardin.
Thank you, Your Honor. I would like to introduce William C. Cowardin, Jr., to bring remarks. Thank you, Your Honor.
Judge Fisher doesn't make many mistakes as a judge, but having me come up here when my first notice was he called me 2 months and asked if I was going to be here, and my second notice was to sit next to Kathy and see my name on this program. So I'm prepared to make a great public speech right now to all of you gentlemen. And probably next to Bob being the oldest guy in the room, okay? I was serving in the Air Force, came back, got a job with Skip Mason, and the Air Force called and said, you want to stay on reserve? So I stayed on reserve, and I ended up going out to Langley, and there was this really smart defense counsel who, with his airmen, read the regulations, understood them better than the prosecutors, and beat them to death the whole time. And he became somebody that I was interested in. And so he and I were sitting in my car down in the parking lot. It was raining, and I said, what are you going to do after Air Force, Fisher? And he sort of fumbled around. I said, look, you know, you got to jump in. Sooner or later, you have to, you know, make a decision to do something. So I hired him out of the Air Force when he came to the end of his term. Now, he stayed in reserves like I did, so that was interesting. But he was always assiduous, and he, after a while, wanted to become a judge. So in 1999, Curtis Overman and I decided that maybe Fisher would make a good judge. And at that time, it was the bar vote that really got you the seat. And so he won the seat, came up here, and I had the pleasure on that occasion of introducing him. I made the speech that got him into being a judge, and it was very. In fact, I have a copy of it. You want me to read it? I kept the copy. And I think the one thing that all of us ought to notice is the smile on this judge's face. Now, if you look at the other portraits around the room, there aren't any smiles on those guys' faces. I wonder why. And the reason is that Tim always had a command of what he was doing in the courtroom. And I remember when I appeared before him, he usually ruled against me, and he usually had the law on my desk when I sat down so that I was prepared for him to rule against me. We had a tumultuous time. We practiced together for quite some time. I can't remember exactly how many years, but we made trips to the PX, and we would take off the middle of the day and do a few things. And I really missed that when he went on the bench. I remember one occasion, he was a general district judge at that time. We came in his chambers and he said, listen to this. And it's who was it? Which governor was it on the phone appointing you? The message on the phone that you played that day. He said, this has got to be a joke. You know? But it really wasn't a joke. A lot of great memories in his courtroom, and knowing him for all the years that we've known him. Today comes to a time where he is now passed from the active bench to the retired bench. And it's sorry to see him go, because, again, with all the faces in the jury box, I can see that all of you look back on your time as a judge and remember all the cases that came and the things you did. And of course, Tim now enters onto that position, and hopefully he'll remember some of the things that he did as an accomplishment and service to both the bar and the community. And I knew that was going to happen. I told the people when he entered on the bench that it was going to happen. It happened, and now it's finished happening, except for once in a while when he sits. So to be here today and to have a chance to remark on his career and to reiterate all of the things that he did as a judge and his time in Newport News was a great honor. And I appreciate it, Tim. Thank you very much. Don't ever ask me to speak again.
Before I recognize our honoree, I want to say thank you, first of all, to Mr. Cowardin for his comments, and to correct an error. I think that I neglected to mention my predecessor, who is Judge Tench, who is also with us, but I get the benefit of coming behind Judge Tench and sitting in the desk of Judge Fisher. And they are very, very big shoes to even attempt to fill. And the wonderful thing about the mentors that happen here in Newport News is that they never leave you behind. And both of them have still helped me each step of the way, along with the judges that I get to share the bench with now. And it's an honor to recognize you, Judge Fisher, if you would come forward to give remarks.
I'll start at the end with the mentor part. When I became a judge, there weren't mentor judges. So I had an unknown mentor, for those of you who used to watch The Gong Show, and had an unknown comic. His name was Will Taylor. He didn't know it at the time. And one of his famous sayings is, "Let your decisions do your talking." So thank you for coming. So I got a job to be a mentor judge to another circuit court judge who's in Hampton, who was rumored to be here today, but is not going to be here, so he's not here to defend himself at this point. And that was Mike Gayton. And I told Mike he had nothing to worry about. He was replacing the most popular circuit court judge in the entire Commonwealth of Virginia amongst all of the other circuit court judges. There was no pressure whatsoever. And in the first conference he was going to be Will's last time giving a civil law update. And I said, don't take any pressure with this at all, because when his name is announced, there's going to be a standing ovation before he speaks. You know, so that may be the reason why Mike Gayton didn't, at this point. Now he's returning the favor, because I got tapped to sit in Hampton all of April, just in case they didn't have a new judge, or the new judge was doing some stuff. So I'm on spring break this week. I was going to be there all week, and I'm not doing that. So then I get a call yesterday that next week is Judge Gayton's jury week, and he wants to do 2 juries that week. I said, okay. Why are you calling me? Oh, because he wants to do one, he wants you to do one. Now, with my luck, his will settle, and I'll have a 3-day jury trial. Kind of like Artisha's. That comment was true, by the way. That was the best child sex witness presentation I'd ever seen, period. And then this 3-day thing we did with someone else who shall remain nameless, but who wrote me a lot, Mr. Goff, as a matter of fact. Part of that, I assume one of the times that Shannon objected at some point, and this is usually when the defendant was digging a hole even deeper. So I just, no, that's okay. And he wanted to cross-examine his former wife. This is a child sex abuse, domestic, everything going on. So he wanted to cross-examine his former wife on some custody side issue. And you said I had supervised exchanges. She said, yes. I did not. She said, yes, you did, because that's when you were fooling that 15-year-old girl in Williamsburg. That was not part of our case.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. And then he said, well, I have the right to make sure everybody understands she's biased against me. And I think that's when I said, I don't think there's any doubt about that at all. I think it's when she came on the bench and seat in the first place, I really would like for you to be dead, at this point. So now, Mr. Goff I invited because he was president of the bar when I retired, and this thing didn't get together in time. And he said at one point that he was looking forward to my portrait hanging. And I want to make sure he had an opportunity, to continue with that at that point. And when I first came here, I wasn't from here. I didn't go to law school here, didn't go to college here. I just showed up at Langley Air Force Base. And one of the things there was the only Newport News connection I had. I started on a Monday. On that same Monday, Jackie Epps started at the Newport News Commonwealth Attorney's Office. Some of you may remember Jackie. I took her job. She left the Air Force on Friday. I came in on Monday. She came into the Newport News Commonwealth Attorney's Office, which, as I understand it, she was the first African-American female hired in that office in 1978. She was also the first African-American female judge advocate in the Air Force. So she has left us, but you know, she allowed me to stay in contact with her, so I thought that was a pretty good person I could follow around and do things. I was looking at something today, and there was an article, and Ms. Krennick was quoted in the article. You know, something about Jackie, because she worked with her, you know, at that point. But that was my only Newport News connection. And when I was there for about a week, someone said, there's a reservist in the law library. And I said, okay, why? I mean, whatever. There's just somebody sitting in the law library. And I went in, and there's this Air Force major who's doing what I found out later was one of the avocations in his life on a weekly basis to do to-do lists down a legal path. Now, none of that had anything to do with the Air Force. It had everything to do with his private practice. I knew that. That's what we were there for. And I did notice, and I told him this morning, the first thing I noticed, because I grew up in the Air Force, my father went in 1951, and then he retired a month after I went on active duty, that he had a very large shock of white hair, needed a haircut. And history repeats itself today at that point. And when I called him and asked him if he was going to be up here, he said, I'm going to make a special trip up here just for that. I said, you don't have to do that. He's in Florida. About halfway through the conversation, he finally said, okay, I've got tickets up here on April 20th because I'm the class agent for my 60th reunion class from VMI, and that's happening on April 23rd and 24th. So thank you for coming up to your class reunion, squeezing in time to speak again, at this one. But I was particularly noticing when he was there that he had a wonderful pair of blue socks with the red alligator on it, as an Izod with his Air Force uniform. I hadn't really seen that before with an Air Force uniform. And this started, he remembers the part in the bank. We're in a car. It's raining. His term was, everybody's got to take this bath sometime, Fisher. You need to get in private practice. So we could follow, I think one of his mother's motto was, owing $1 million was the same thing as having $1 million. Or as we experienced in private practice, the thrill of heavy debt. What he forgets is 8 years later, he left us and went to Coffin and Canals. And then came back from Coffin and Canals at this point. But I am glad with some of the people who are here, because I noticed the last couple of years I was practicing, I was the oldest person in the room. Yeah. And when you're talking about a lawyer coming up on the Friday docket, there was at least one lawyer when I practiced that I never saw sit down in the courtroom at all. He just wandered in. And miraculously, Judge Curran would call his case. How did he have that timing? It was perfect. He walked right in and Mr. Morrison. Mr. Morrison. It's amazing how he got that case called. So I'd like to thank the bar for the portrait. It was not something I've never really seen a picture of me I liked, and that one's, I guess, okay. At that point, I didn't order the wallet sizes. If you want those, you have to get those later at that point. But I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the Newport News Bar Association and the Greater Peninsula Women's Bar Association and the Peninsula Bar Association, without question, at that point. And I think some people have decided that judgeships are a little too political these days, one way or the other. They've kind of always been. It's just that when we were coming up, particularly when another judge, who shall remain nameless, but said something a minute ago, remarked about going to the bar luncheon and being interviewed and had the job at the end of the bar luncheon. Well, that's because all of the delegates and the senators were lawyers, and they were all members of the Newport News Bar Association. So it wasn't like it wasn't political. It's just like, okay, that's the way it was. And now it's different. They're just spread out with other people. So in 1990, the bar was asked to nominate people to be substitute judges. And Judge Thomas Carpenter, who I practiced with at that point, asked me if I wanted to have my name submitted. I said, okay. So, and it's not like I'm going to pick on Judge Curran, but he keeps coming up in the conversation. So he calls me. He said, do you want to have this substitute judge job? And before I could say yes or no, he said, now remember, I wasn't a substitute judge, Randy wasn't a substitute judge, Jay Warren wasn't a substitute judge. And I was getting ready to say, well, did you want me to take this job or not? I'll do it, but that wasn't a real recommendation there that I just saw at that point. And then I went on the bench in 99. And this is 90 and 99 is where all of this kind of starts. So we're going to have three ladies stand up. It's Denise Hayne. You get to stand up.
Yes, sir.
You said you are standing, Rita. Phyllis. Now, if you have any complaints about me ever being a judge, ever, okay, they raised me since 1990. So if you got some questions, go see them at that point. And that's kind of the way I describe. Somebody asked me the difference between being a general district court judge and the circuit court judge. And I said, well, the biggest difference is that in the district court, I had 31 women telling me what to do. That's not a gender comment. That's fact. That's 31 women telling me what to do. I get to the circuit court, and it's 4 or 5. I've gotten rid of some people that no longer can tell me what to do at that point. And so I had no idea how I got this job in Newport News, but it was clearly with the bar, which means the lawyers in the bar, in all 3 of the bar associations. And I met a few people as I went along. We were talking, I was thinking this morning, some of the cases that featured Howard Gwynn, and we both ended up in an apartment complex on Jefferson Avenue, which shall remain nameless. And there were a number of plea agreements done at the dumpsters. I remember one where I sent in an alibi for a witness. Howard and I were out at the dumpster throwing trash away. And he said, well, we talked to your witness. And I said, yeah. And he told me he's not going to lie for your client anymore. He lied for him once at Fort Eustis to the misformation. He's not going to lie for your client again. I wasn't all sure how that case worked out, but that was, it was a very official meeting at that point. And then with Josh, he probably doesn't remember that we actually had some security video cameras when I practiced law. And when I came to Langley, after about 9 months, I became the area defense counsel, which is the criminal defense lawyer. And if you're talking about service like during the Vietnam era, people didn't like you much. That was a double problem because that program started in 1974. And actually Mike King from Hampton was the first area defense counsel at Langley Air Force Base. And I had my own office, my own person working for me. And the command structure generally hated us because we were the bad guys because we were around all the criminals. And I went about 9 months. I was a court marshal at Fort Meade with an Air Force guy. And there's a script. If any of you watch Breaker Morant, it's a great movie. The court martial in Breaker Morant comes from the British Army. All of our scripts in the military come from the British. It's the same language at that point. And there is a script for a plea. It's a little bit like what happens here when the jury verdict goes to the jury and you're trying to look at the piece of paper. Is that good or bad? Then they had a form. And one of them was if it came out, it's our duty to inform you. That meant it's not a unanimous verdict, but you've been found guilty. If they came out, it's our duty to advise you, you've been found not guilty. So they came out and said, it's duty to advise you that we found you not guilty. And my client looked at me and said, what does that mean? I said, I don't know, I've never heard it before. I didn't know it was an option. And, one that I remember, this is where the video story comes in. Actually, Judge West was involved. There's 3 different robberies. He confessed. Everything was going on. One was on video. So the plea being offered by retired Judge Sandy Conyers now was the minimum on everything. Well, he's a convicted felon. He used a gun 3 times, and there's 3 robberies. The number wasn't coming out well. It just didn't seem to think that he was 39 and this is what he wanted to do for the rest of his life. So he said no. And I said, okay. And Sandy said, well, which one should we do first? I said, well, let's do the one with the video. Yeah, that's fine. And he didn't wear sunglasses, I'm pretty sure. The camera's like 10 feet away in some Subway sandwich shop, bright lights, hat that they found in his house, shirt that they found in his house. Didn't find the gun because he told a Hampton detective he'd been tricked out of it at a crack house. He wasn't very smart at that point. And his answer to, well, what about the video? He said, that's not me. So I instantly thought of Josh Goff, because I have attended some trials where I'm pretty sure that he was there, the jury was there, but we weren't watching the same trial at that point. And I was imagining his closing argument with this guy. By the way, if you want to, Hopkins keeps a list of my fan mail people. These are ones who are not getting out. Okay. The one with the blood, that was a different one. That somebody was when we had kind of the problem with little powder stuff coming in the mail and things, whatever, the anthrax. And one of the clerks of the circuit court brings me this letter. And he asked me to write to Judge Hubbard, but I took Judge Hubbard's place, and then, he continues to write. And it's in his own blood from the Red Onion, writing something. Here, do you want this letter? I said, no, the detectives need that letter. They'll make a copy, give it to you, and you give it to me. You put that in the bag and go take it to them. And we were down in 5 when they brought him in for something. There wasn't enough years left to give him, unfortunately, at that point. But they had the special shackles that you lock at the knee, so you can't either bend or you can't stand. You can't one or the other. Charles Hayden was his lawyer, someone I was trying to supplement your career for with other cases. And Hayden was over here at the council table, and he was in the jury box, locked with 5 guys around him. So the one you probably liked was from John Reagan. That was the death penalty case where he complimented me on my, educational things. But over the years, Deputy Hopkins and I noticed that he was probably unraveling. He's not doing very well. But, so before I unravel something here from Mr. Goff, I thought about his closing argument in that case, because I remember what we did with Willie. Willie's still in. He got life from that jury. I had never seen anybody get life for a robbery before that. It might not have been bifurcated, but I could just hear Judge Goff looking to the jury, going, but he said it wasn't him. And I knew that 2 jurors were going back there and going, well, he said it wasn't him. Oh, it's hung jury. So, Mr. Goff, I don't think you ever saw Dean Martin's roast in person. I was anticipating a little worse than it was. Thank you. That was very nice. But I did bring something for you if you want to come up and unveil it for yourself.
Please come forward.
That's by Charles Bragg. He's a caricaturist. There's a certificate of authenticity. That was in my office. On the back, that's Don Quixote with a few arrows in his shield at this point. And I always thought Don Quixote was the patron saint of criminal defense lawyers.
There you go.
Because you want to talk about tilting at windmills. Or as one guy I talked to in the jail after I'd been somewhere, he said, do you want to hear my version of the events? And I said, why? Would it help? But that's yours. Congratulations. I knew we'd have a good home. So I think I'm about done as far as that goes. I'm going to the unveiling. But when they were talking to me about the picture here, I'm not going to try to make the bar do things, but anyway, general district court judges and do not get their portraits done. And Barbara Harvell paid for Jim to have his in the traffic court. And that was always wonderful to sit in there and watch him, and people would look at him and then go to the clerk's office and look at his portrait. And then they turn around. That's the same guy at that point. But I got conned into it. Actually, somebody was very insistent about this. You all may know my twin. Oh, you don't know we're twins?
They are.
They don't understand, do they? Okay, I have a twin sister. He has a twin brother. We're twins, as far as that goes. So he was pretty insistent on this. So there was one picture that I thought I, might want to try with this one. So everybody gets to come up when I call your name. You 3 have already stood up. They know you started this, from way back when. Nancy, over here. You guys get to line up over here. Okay. Teresa's hiding in the back. I told you you probably want to be careful coming here. I don't know if Yolanda sneaked in here somewhere. Oh, wait a minute.
She was here. She snuck out.
No. You came in at the right time. Come on, Tracy.
Tracy?
No, you thought you were sneaking in last. That's not working out. Okay, Libby, over here.
Aww.
So I think, Yolanda and Vanessa were here. Okay, that's fine. Anyway,
Renee,
this
you
one
got
here. She spent more time on the phone with people, trying to help them.
Renee.
And I'd say, why are you talking to people?
You didn't take them to race.
Yes. Well, I didn't want to puncture her, faith in humanity, but I said, you have to understand something. Everything down here is all about the money. Pay attention.
I know.
Okay, there ain't anything that's not about money down here.
No, it's not.
No, okay. So they were around for a long. She had the audacity to communicate with me in 2005 through somebody and wonder if I was going to keep her. Well, first of all, I didn't know I had an option, but that's fine. You were there. Why?
Why not? Right.
Okay. And now we get the person who is in charge and has been for a whole bunch of years here. And this one gets a standing ovation. That's Deputy Hopkins. Come here.
Yeah.
Most of the time, I didn't have to do anything. He'd just come in and say, hang on, they're talking. So, okay. All right, let me know when they're done. He'd come in, they're done. All right, thank you. I'm done here at that point. So he was in a long line of bailiffs. My first one actually retired in York County. And then a few others have come along. But you were here for like ever, at that point. So that's fine. But yes, it's been wonderful having this crew, to say the least. But yeah, this was part of the three or four I listened to. They just come in and say, here. It's kind of like what Denise did in the General District Court. There's a different, General District Court judges actually have certain things they have to do in the General District Court. And Denise would pull up in a corner and say, here, you need to sign this. And it was offering somebody employment. And I said, did I like her in my interview? And she said, oh yeah, you did. So, that took care of that. But without them, this would not have been anywhere near as much fun as it has been, to say the least. But anybody else I forgot? The commissioner, I don't know if the commissioner got actually, Mr. Nachman, he's hiding out back there. I don't know if you know the commissioner of accounts for City of Newport News. He's been here since the Civil War. He said they won't let him retire. So I don't know. But anyway, thank you all very much for coming. I don't have a reception because I knew that the oldest Marine in the room was going to be here. That'd be Al Masters. And the problem you got, if you're the oldest Marine in the room and there's a cake, he's looking for a sword to cut the cake. And I was thinking a combination of Al Masters and a sword in this room might not be the best combination. So we skipped the cake part, But yeah, we've been around with way back when. That was 1982 or 83, I forget at that point. But thank you all very much. And thank you for finally getting here. How you doing, man? You gonna retire again? Okay. You're not retiring.
We'll do it after.
Anyway, thank you for coming. There's no reception. Dinner's at Judge Pugh's house.
Little bit of business, Judge.
Oh, a little bit of business.
Excuse me, I'm so sorry. Just one moment. Hold on. I'm gonna have to bang my gavel. I don't ever do this. The court recognizes Mr. Murphrey to make a motion.
Thank you, Your Honor. I move that a copy of these proceedings be spread in the record of the court.
The motion is granted. The court does order that these proceedings be spread on the records of the court as a ceremonial event. And, Mr. Murphrey?
Thank you, Your Honor. I move that a copy of the proceedings be forwarded to Judge Fisher.
The court grants and so directs.
Thank you, Your Honor.
At this time, court is adjourned. Please come forward and see the portrait and the man of the hour.